Welcome to the History Hour. Today we're talking about Hitler's death. First, we're going to go over a little bit of history, and here's Brianna.
Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in the small Australian town of Brno to Alois Hitler, who later became a senior customs official, and his wife Clara, who was from a poor peasant family. At primary school, Hitler showed great intellectual potential and was extremely popular with fellow pupils, as well as being admired for his leadership qualities. However, competition at secondary school was tougher, and Hitler stopped trying as a result. He also lost his popularity among his fellow students and instead preferred to reenact battles from the Boer War with the younger children. At the age of 15, he failed his exams and was told to repeat the year, but he left without a formal education instead. At the age of 18, he moved to Vienna with money inherited after his father's death in 1903. In order to pursue a career in art, as this was his best subject at school. However, his applications for both the Vienna Academy of Art and the School of Architecture were rejected. It was supposedly at this time that Hitler first became interested in politics and how the masses could be made to respond to certain themes. He was particularly impressed with the anti-Semitic nationalist Christian Socialist Party. During the First World War, he volunteered to fight for the German army and gained the rank of corporal, earning accolades as a dispatch runner. He won several awards for bravery, including the Iron Cross First Class. In October 1918, he was blinded in a mustard gas attack. Germany surrendered while Hitler was in hospital and went into a state of Great Depression, spending lots of time in tears. After the war ended, Hitler's future seemed uncertain. In 1919, Hitler attended his first meeting of the German Workers' Party, an anti-Semitic nationalist group, as a spy for the German army. However, he found he agreed with Anton Drexler's German nationalism. Hitler quickly cemented his reputation as an engaging orator through his passion about the injustices faced by Germany as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. It soon became clear that people were joining the party just to see Hitler make his speeches, which would leave the audience in a state of near hysteria and willing to do whatever he suggested. He quickly rose through the ranks and by 1921 was the leader of the renamed National Socialist German Workers' Party, Nazi. With terrible economic conditions and rapid inflation, support for Hitler's party grew. By 1923, the Nazis had 56,000 members and many more supporters. On November 8 and 9 of 1923, Hitler staged the Nazi beer hall putsch. He hoped to force the Bavarian government to work with the Nazis and march together on Berlin. The attempt failed, but although Hitler was tried for treason, the judge gave him very light sentencing. While in prison, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, which formulated his political ideas. He reorganized his party on his release from jail, but it was not until the World Depression hit Germany that the Nazis were able to attract significant followers. In office, Hitler set about consolidating his power, appointing Nazis to government and gaining control of emergency powers. He eliminated all opposition in the name of emergency control, and with the death of Hindenburg in 1934, Hitler's power was secured. Hitler put Germany's unemployed to work on a massive reimmigrant program using propaganda and manufacturing enemies, such as the Jews, to prepare the country for war. Initially, Hitler's actions were ignored by his powerful neighbors, and they believed appeasement was the only way to avoid a war. In 1936, Hitler invaded the Rhineland. which had been demilitarized at Versailles. He then proceeded to annex Austria and parts of Czechoslovakia under the Munich Agreement of 1938. The West accepted this. In 1939, Hitler made an alliance with Russia and with Italy. On September 1939, Hitler invaded Poland, and the Second World War began as a result. In April 1940, Denmark and Norway were also taken. France quickly followed. Hitler had conquered much of the Western Europe. Now he turned his sights east. In 1941, despite the alliance, Germany invaded Russia under Operation Barbarossa. It was one of his greatest mistakes. With the German advance slowed by Russian scorched earth policy, the German army found themselves in the Russian winter without an adequate supply line. In 1943, they started their long retreat. At the same time, the Western Allies were pushing hard and began to advance on Germany. In response, Hitler withdrew most entirely. It was reported he was increasingly erratic and out of touch. In 1944, there was an unsuccessful assassination attempt, and in response, Hitler stepped up the atmosphere of suspicion and terror. Hitler committed suicide on April 30th, 1945, with his long-term girlfriend, Eva Braun, who he is thought to have perhaps married at the last minute. Germany's surrender followed soon after.
Thank you, Brianna. Now I'm going to go over Adolf Hitler's suicide and all the theories surrounding his death. Adolf Hitler killed himself by gunshot on April 30th, 1945, in his Fuhrer bunker in Berlin. His wife Eva committed suicide with him by taking cyanide. That afternoon, in accordance with Hitler's prior instructions, the remains were carried up the stairs through the bunker's emergency exit, doused in petrol, and set alight in the Reich Chancellery Garden outside the bunker. Records in the Soviet archives show that their burnt remains were recovered and interred in successive locations until 1970, when they were again exhumed, cremated, and the ashes scattered. I find it personally interesting that he orders his men to take his body and cremate it, essentially, by burning the whole body. And I just find it interesting that even though he's already dead, he has to cremate his body. Some people say that the significance of that is because he wants nobody to take his spot and say that they're Hitler. But anyway, here's another one. Accounts differ as to the cause of death. One states that he died by poison only, and another that he died by a self-inflicted gunshot while biting down on a cyanide capsule. Contemporary historians have rejected these accounts as being either Soviet propaganda or attempted compromise in order to reconcile the different conclusions. One eyewitness recorded that the body showed signs of having been shot through the mouth, but this has been proven unlikely. There is also controversy regarding the authenticity of the skull and jaw fragments which were recovered. In 2009, American researchers performed DNA tests on a skull Soviet officials had long believed to be Hitler's. The test and examination revealed that the skull was actually that of a woman less than 40 years old. The jaw fragments which had been recovered were not tested. Now, I wonder why they wouldn't want to test that. If they already tested the skull and they found out that it was a woman's, why can't they just test the jaw to find out if it's Hitler's or not? Now, that's just another weird thing I see. Another possibility is that Hitler fled or escaped Argentina. This has been widely dismissed by historians, but it's a possibility because many SS soldiers fled to Argentina after the war because it was like a safe haven, and that's where everybody knew to go. And the reason that that theory has been dismissed is because historians who believe that Hitler and Braun died in the last days of World War II in Europe. Guy Walters has described that the theory in Dustin and Williams' book as rubbish, adding, "There's no substance to it at all. It appeals to be the deluded fantasies of conspiracy theorists. But because those SS soldiers were going there to escape, it's a good chance that Hitler could have gone there. Something else that I found interesting is that declassified FBI documents contain a number of alleged sightings of Hitler, along with conspiracy theories of his escape from Germany. The FBI state that information within those documents pertaining to the escape and sightings of Hitler cannot be verified. I mean, if we have something that could potentially prove that he was still alive after the war, why is it such a big deal that we can't find that out and it's being covered up? Um, Going back to the skull in 2009 and how they tested it, a skull fragment with a bullet hole found outside Hitler's bunker and kept in Russia's Federal Archives in Moscow was for decades believed to be that of Hitler. But when they tested it in 2009, the skull DNA tested was of a woman's. This next information is from Speaking Frankly by Byrnes, page 68. Shortly after his arrival, on July 17th, Stalin came to call on the president. We had to remember to call him Generalissimo rather than Marshal Stalin, for he had been accorded the new title in recognition of the Red Army's great success. It was the first time the president and Stalin had met. After a very pleasant conversation, the president quite informally asked Stalin, Motilov, and Pavlov, the capable Soviet interpreter, to stay and have lunch with him. They accepted. The conversation was general in nature and cordial in spirit. The president was favorably impressed by Stalin, as I had been at Yalta. In speaking of our visit to Berlin, I asked the Generalissimo his views of how Hitler had died. To my surprise, he said he believed that Hitler was alive and that it was possible he was then either in Spain or Argentina. Some 10 days later, I asked him if he had changed in his views, and he said he had not. This next part is the interviews we took. We took one with our world history teacher, Mrs. Kostahovsky, and our AP Human Geography teacher, Mr. Pittner. We also took some with our friends and other people. Before me or Brianna interviewed somebody, we would give them a brief summary of the information, evidence, and the theories. This next interview is with Sofia Calcaterra, who is a student at Eastroy High School. I'm here with Sophia, and
Try this cheese.
what do you think happened to Hitler?
I don't know. I have some reasons to believe that he's dead, and I have some reasons to believe that he was living after he supposedly died. I don't know. I kind of would need more concrete evidence of people supposedly seeing Hitler on the street and news articles saying Hitler's actually alive. LOL, this is actually a thing. Rather than just the facts that say it was a woman that they burned or whatever.
Well, there is actually some proof showing that the FBI even has some stuff of sightings, and they can't disclaim that evidence, and they can't say if they believe so or not. So there is some evidence with sightings.
Okay, is that?
So what do you think? With what you know, what do you think's the most plausible?
I think everyone hated Hitler after the Holocaust, so I think that he would want to stage his death. But I don't know. Part of me thinks that he actually wanted to die because I don't know. Maybe he was thinking back on some of the things that he did to people and thinking how horrible they were, and he actually wanted to die. But then, I don't know. Maybe he just wanted less publicity on his side and the Nazi side. I don't know.
All right, thank you. I then interviewed our world history teacher, Mrs. Kostahovsky. I'm here today with Mrs. Kostahovsky, and I gave her the evidence and theories, and this is her response.
All right, so in terms of the question that was posed to me by Josh about Hitler and the potential that maybe with the conspiracy theories that he really didn't die and he escaped somewhere, I like to think that he really did die and that they just managed to hide where they ended up putting the remains from him because they didn't want people to build shrines to him and any of the other cult fixation. At this point, because like with so many people, like they held him in reverence, and again with all the atrocities that he helped commit and influenced, etc., I like to think that he got what he deserved by dying, and that he's not, he didn't escape to somewhere in South America and live out his days in some like cushy tropical location while others had to suffer because at his hands from all of the stuff that happened during the duration of like the pre-war years and even during the war, etc. So he possibly could have escaped. I like to hold to the fact that I think he did not, and that when he died, he did die because that's what he deserved.
All right, thank you.
My last interview was with our AP Human Geography teacher, Mr. Pittner.
I'm here today with Mr. Pittner, and Mr. Pittner, what do you think actually happened to Hitler, or what are your thoughts on his death?
I definitely think that Hitler did not survive World War II. Now, but what happened to his remains definitely could have been moved around quite a bit, and I'm sure they didn't want it publicly known where he was buried. They didn't want it to become a shrine or anything like that, kind of like what the Obama administration did for Osama bin Laden. They immediately got rid of the body, burned it, put it in the ocean so no one could, make a big deal about it. So I think probably something like that happened to Hitler, but in terms of where his remains eventually ended up, that's a great question. I couldn't say for sure.
Do you think there's any possibility he could have gone to, say, Argentina or somewhere else?
Is there a possibility? I suppose, but I feel like no matter how you disguised Hitler, people were going to recognize him and the word would have got out. Granted, it was the 40s and there wasn't internet, things like that, but I feel like that would have been a pretty tough secret to keep if he stayed alive.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
That concludes the interviews. Now, to conclude things, I will leave it up to you. I was thinking if we should put our views into it or not, but I think everybody should have the right to make up their own mind with the evidence and what they heard and what other information they may have found and their personal beliefs. That concludes this podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the History Hour. The music in this podcast was brought to you by bensound.com. Check out bensound.com if you're looking to make a podcast for all their royalty-free music. They have a wide variety of music for your next podcast or project.